and then a personality that stands for the first idea. And then inside your mind, you have a dialogue, an argumentative dialogue or a cooperative dialogue between these two different stances. And then you derive a conclusion, and then you act it out. And so you test the conclusion before you act it out in the world, so that if it's a stupid conclusion, you don't bother punishing yourself too dreadfully by enacting it. But all that's the internalization of what's really primarily a social process. Most of the way that we think, and certainly most of the way that we keep ourselves organized psychologically, is a consequence of dialogue. It's thought in free speech. If there's no free speech, there's no thought. And so if you think thought is worthwhile, if you think something through, you're less likely to suffer dreadfully from your stupidity, then you have to allow for free thought, because there's no distinction between free speech. I mean, there's no distinction between free speech and free thought. And there's no distinction between free thought and thought. You know, you don't have to think about things that no one disagrees about, because if there's consensus generated around something, we probably know the answer to it. If there's conflict around something, and so it's a contentious issue, that's precisely an indication that that's a place that we have to think. And so that's a place that we have to be able to speak. And if we can't speak our minds, well, we can't think. And so if you make an argument against free speech, you should ban it if it's offensive, for example. Well, then you have to make an argument against thought itself. And I would say the assaults on free speech are predicated on the idea that, in some sense, individual thought is an illusion. But you know, that we're only mouthpieces of our group identity, for example. That's a common modern, postmodern, let's say, proposition, which I believe to be not only absurd but reprehensible as well as absurd. So,
well, let me tell you a concern of mine personally. But I decide to talk freely. I decide to talk openly, to lose on purpose that political correctness. This may generate reaction, bad reaction. It seems like I have to like my being different in a masochistic way somehow. So how do I see my courage to speak the truth and everything that comes with it in today's world?
Well, look, there's no doubt that there is a price to speaking often. And there's evidence of that everywhere. I mean, I've watched many people be mobbed, let's say, on Twitter, for example. And so maybe they'll say something and 20 people are outraged by it. And people tend to respond to that psychologically